Every day on the moon began the same way. Ethan woke before the alarm sounded. He always did. There was something about the quiet of the lunar base that pulled him gently out of sleep, as if the silence itself was calling his name. He lay still for a moment, eyes closed, listening. Nothing moved, no wind, no birds, no distant traffic, only the soft hum of the life support system flowed through the walls, steady and calm, like a slow mechanical breath. It reminded him that the base was alive, even if the moon outside was not. When the alarm finally chimed, it was quiet and polite. A single tone. No urgency. No rush. Ethan reached over and turned it off with a slow, practiced motion. He never hurried here. There was no reason to. He opened his eyes. Above him, the ceiling light glowed softly, adjusted to mimic early morning on Earth. The light never flickered. It simply existed. He watched it for a few seconds, letting his thoughts drift, letting his body wake up at its own pace. Another day, he thought, another simple cycle. He sat up carefully, feet floating for a brief moment before settling back down as he adjusted to the moon's gentle gravity. Even after all this time, that lightness still surprised him. Not enough to excite him anymore, just enough to remind him where he was. Ethan stretched his arms slowly. His movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. He had learned that fast motions felt wrong here. Slow was better. Slow felt natural. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood. The room was small and perfectly organized. Bed. Storage locker. A narrow desk bolted to the floor. Nothing extra. Nothing unnecessary. Ethan liked it that way. Clutter made noise in the mind, and he preferred his thoughts quiet. He walked to the small window. Outside, the moon waited. The surface stretched endlessly, pale and soft, like frozen dust under a black sky. Earth hung in the distance, round and blue, unmoving. Ethan looked at it every morning. He never grew tired of it. But he also never stared for too long. Looking at Earth made time feel strange, so he turned away. In the hygiene module, he washed his face with warm water recycled countless times before. The water felt the same every day. He liked that. Familiar sensations were comforting. He dried his face slowly, watching his reflection, a man in his 40s. Calm eyes. Relaxed shoulders. Someone who had learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. He dressed in his standard base clothing, soft fabric, neutral colors, nothing tight. The clothes floated slightly as he moved, as if they were also waking up. Breakfast came next. He prepared it without thinking. A pouch of warm oats. Mild flavor. Easy to digest. He sat at the small table and ate slowly, each bite followed by a pause. Eating on the moon was never rushed. There was no clock demanding attention, no morning chaos, only routine. When the pouch was empty, Ethan cleaned the table, secured the items, and checked the daily schedule displayed on the wall screen. The list was short, as it always was: system check, surface walk, log entry. He nodded once. That was enough. Ethan took a deep breath, long and steady, then let it out just as slowly. The day had begun. Not with excitement. Not with urgency, but with calm, and on the moon. Calm was everything. After breakfast, Ethan did not rush, he never rushed after waking. The moon had taught him that speed was unnecessary. Everything important still happened, even if it happened slowly. Especially if it happened slowly, he pushed himself gently down the corridor toward the control module. His footsteps made almost no sound. The floor absorbed them, soft and patient, as if it expected nothing more than a light touch. The control module was dimly lit. Screens lined the walls, each one glowing with quiet information. Numbers. Lines. Symbols. All of them steady. All of them calm. Ethan liked the screens. They spoke honestly. They never exaggerated. They never changed their tone. He strapped himself into the chair at the center console and took a moment to sit without doing anything. This pause was part of the routine. A short silence before attention, then he began. Checklist 1, oxygen levels. He read the numbers slowly, even though he already knew them by heart. They were always the same. Still, he read them. Routine was not about surprise. It was about reassurance. Oxygen stable, pressure nominal, flow consistent. He checked each item and marked it complete with a gentle tap of his finger. The sound was soft, almost polite. Checklist 2, temperature control. The base maintained a constant warmth, just enough to feel human. Ethan remembered how temperature used to change so dramatically on Earth. Hot afternoons, cool mornings, unexpected drafts. Here, nothing changed unless it needed to. He appreciated that. Checklist 3, power systems. Solar input steady, battery reserves full, no anomalies. Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction as he completed the list. Not pride. Not excitement. Just a small internal click, like something aligning correctly. Outside the window, the lunar surface remained perfectly still. Shadows did not move quickly here. Time itself seemed to slow down on the moon, stretching into something long and gentle. He allowed himself to look outside for a moment. The sun sat low above the horizon, casting long shadows across the dust. Ethan watched one shadow slowly creep across a rock. It moved so gradually that it felt almost imaginary. He returned his attention to the console. Next came the manual checks. These were his favorite. Manual checks required presence. They forced him to slow down even more. He floated from panel to panel, opening small access doors, inspecting seals, listening carefully for sounds that did not belong. A faint hum here, a soft vibration there. Everything sounded exactly as it should. Ethan placed his hand against one wall panel and closed his eyes briefly. The vibration passed gently into his palm. It was a reminder that the base was working. Breathing. Existing. He liked to imagine that the base trusted him. When the checks were complete, he returned to the central console and logged the results. His typing was slow and steady. He did not shorten words. He did not skip details. The log was not for speed. It was for clarity. System stable, he typed. Morning checks complete. He paused before submitting the entry. Pause was also part of the routine. In that moment, Ethan allowed his thoughts to drift. Not far. Just enough to soften the edges of his mind. He thought about nothing in particular. The quiet made space for that. Then he pressed submit. A small confirmation light blinked once. Finished. Ethan leaned back in his chair and let his body float slightly against the straps. His breathing slowed even more. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Outside, the moon waited patiently. The next task would come soon. But not yet. There was time, and time, on the moon, moved exactly as slowly as he needed it to. Ethan unstrapped himself from the chair and floated gently toward the equipment bay. His body moved with quiet confidence, every motion familiar, every turn expected. He had walked these corridors so many times that he no longer needed to think about where he was going. The equipment bay was cool and orderly. His suit stood upright in its frame, waiting. White. Smooth. Silent. It looked almost empty without him inside, like a shell resting between tides. Ethan paused in front of it, as he always did. This pause mattered. He rested his hands on the suit's chest plate and took a slow breath. Preparing for the surface walk was never rushed. The moon did not forgive mistakes. But it respected patience. He began with the inner layers, soft fabric against skin. Secure straps. Gentle pressure. Each step followed the same sequence he had learned long ago. His hands moved steadily, without hurry, without doubt. As he worked, his breathing matched his motions. Inhale while fastening, exhale while adjusting. The rhythm calmed him. Next came the outer suit. He stepped backward into it, guided by the frame. The suit closed around him carefully, piece by piece, as if it were learning his shape all over again. Seal checks followed. He tested each connection slowly, listening for leaks, feeling for vibrations that did not belong. The suit responded with quiet approval. Everything fit. Everything held. The helmet came last. Ethan held it for a moment before placing it on his head. Through the clear visor, the world already felt slightly distant, slightly softer. He lowered it gently and locked it into place. A soft hiss filled his ears as the suit pressurized. Comfortable, stable, familiar. He ran the suit diagnostics, eyes moving calmly across the display inside the helmet. Oxygen flow steady. Temperature optimal. Mobility unrestricted, green indicators everywhere. Ethan smiled, just slightly. He moved to the airlock and secured himself inside. The inner door closed with a quiet finality. He stood still as the pressure equalized, listening to the gentle sounds of the system working around him. This was his favorite moment, the pause between inside and outside, between shelter and open space. When the outer door opened, light flooded in. The moon lay before him, endless and pale. Dust shimmered softly beneath the sun. Shadows stretched long and thin across the ground, unmoving at first glance. Ethan stepped forward. His boots met the surface with a soft, muted contact. He adjusted his balance, feeling the gentle pull of lunar gravity. Every step felt light, almost playful, but he kept his pace slow and measured. The suit supported him. The ground accepted him. He took another step. Then another. With each movement, the base grew slightly smaller behind him. Ahead, the surface extended quietly in all directions. No sound reached his ears except his own breathing and the faint whisper of the suit systems. Inhale, exhale. Ethan walked toward a familiar marker placed in the dust days earlier. It stood exactly where he had left it. Nothing moved here unless he moved it. He stopped and looked around. The sky was black and perfect. Earth hovered in the distance, calm and bright. Ethan acknowledged it with a brief glance, then lowered his eyes back to the moon. This was where he was. This was enough. He logged his position, adjusted his tools, and prepared to continue the walk. There was no rush. There never was. On the moon, each step was its own small moment, and Ethan let each one exist fully, quietly, and without resistance. Ethan followed the same path he walked every day. The moon did not change, but routines did not require change. They required consistency. His boots pressed gently into the dust, leaving slow, careful footprints behind him. Each step lifted easily, then returned to the surface as if guided by an invisible hand. He kept his pace steady. Too fast felt careless, too slow felt uncertain. This pace was neither. The path curved slightly around a small cluster of rocks. Ethan had named them in his mind long ago, though he never spoke the names out loud. Naming things made them feel louder, more present. He preferred quiet familiarity. As he walked, he monitored the suit display without focusing on it. The numbers remained stable, predictable, calm. They existed at the edge of his awareness, where they belonged. His breathing filled the helmet. Inhale, pause, exhale. The sound was soft and rhythmic, like waves against a distant shore. It grounded him, reminding him that he was still human inside all this equipment. He stopped at the first marker and knelt carefully. The motion felt slow and deliberate in the moon's gravity, as if time itself was stretching to accommodate him. He brushed a thin layer of dust away from a small sensor embedded in the ground. Everything was exactly as it should be. Ethan checked the readings and logged them with a simple voice command. His voice sounded calm inside the helmet, steady and unhurried. He liked hearing it that way. He stood again and continued forward. The silence here was complete. Not the kind of silence that waited to be broken, but the kind that felt finished, whole. Nothing needed to happen for it to be enough. Ethan let his thoughts drift as he walked. They did not travel far. They stayed close, moving slowly, like dust settling after a gentle step. He did not think about Earth. He did not think about the future. He did not think about the past. He thought about walking, about balance, about pressure, about the quiet cooperation between his body and the suit. At the edge of the path, he paused and looked back. The base stood firm against the dark sky, its shape clean and familiar. It did not look lonely. It looked patient. Like it was waiting, not for him, but with him. Ethan felt a small sense of reassurance settle in his chest. He turned forward again and approached the final marker of the walk. The ground here dipped slightly, creating a shallow shadow that never quite disappeared. He adjusted his footing and stepped carefully, respecting the surface. Another reading, another log, done. He stood still for a moment longer than necessary. This moment was his. The sun's light touched the horizon at a low angle, painting the dust in soft shades of silver and pale gold. The beauty was subtle, not demanding attention. It existed whether he looked at it or not. Ethan lowered his gaze and began the return walk. His footprints led him back the way he came, a quiet record of movement in an otherwise untouched world. He followed them calmly, step by step, breath by breath. When the base grew closer, the silence did not fade. It simply shifted, becoming something enclosed, something held. The airlock waited. Ethan reached it and placed his hand against the outer door, feeling the faint vibration beneath the glove. He paused, just once more, then he went inside. the door closed behind him with a gentle sound. The path outside remained silent, unchanged. Inside the airlock, everything slowed again, the outer door sealed with a soft, reassuring sound. Ethan stood still while the pressure adjusted, listening to the gentle sequence of the system at work. There was no rush to move. The moon had already taught him patience, the base simply reminded him, a quiet hiss, a steady hum, then silence. When the inner door opened, warm air greeted him like a familiar presence. He stepped back into the corridor, the weight of the suit settling differently now, heavier than outside but still manageable. The transition always felt like returning from a long breath. He moved to the equipment bay and secured the suit in its frame. Each latch clicked softly into place. He removed the helmet last, lifting it away with care and resting it gently where it belonged. The air felt closer without the visor. Warmer. Softer. Ethan wiped his face with a small towel and drank a few slow sips of water. He stood for a moment, eyes half closed, letting his body recalibrate. The walk had been quiet, successful, uneventful. Uneventful was good. He changed out of the inner layers and stored them neatly. Nothing was ever left out. Order was another form of calm, and he protected it carefully. Next came the debrief. Ethan sat at the desk in his room, the light dimmed slightly now to signal the passing of time. He opened the daily log and began to type, fingers moving slowly across the keys. Surface walk completed. Markers stable. No irregularities observed. He paused after each line, rereading it, making sure it said exactly what it needed to say, and nothing more. The log was not a story. It was a record. Simple. Honest. When he finished, he saved the entry and closed the screen. The room felt even quieter now. Ethan lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling for a few moments. The light above had shifted almost imperceptibly, warmer now, gentler. It told his body that the most active part of the day was over. He placed his hands on his chest and breathed. Inhale, exhale. The base responded with its own steady rhythm, systems cycling softly in the background. It felt like being inside something that knew how to take care of itself, and of him. Ethan turned onto his side and allowed his thoughts to drift again. Not toward memories. Not toward plans. Just toward sensation, the softness of the bed, the faint vibration of the floor, the calm weight of the moon above and below him. Outside, the surface remained untouched, his footprints slowly fading into shadow. Inside, the stillness gathered around him like a blanket. There was nothing more to do for now, and that was exactly how it should be. Midday on the moon did not announce itself. There was no sun climbing high, no sharp change in light, no feeling of urgency. Instead, the base adjusted gently, lights softened, tones warmed, and time slid forward without asking for attention. Ethan welcomed this part of the day. He moved slowly through the corridor, stretching his shoulders, rolling his neck with care. His body felt light but grounded, calm but awake. The surface walk had left a pleasant stillness in his muscles, like the quiet after a long, easy swim. He prepared a simple meal, a warm pouch. Neutral flavor. Enough to sustain, not enough to distract. He sat at the table and ate without screens. Without sound. Each bite was followed by a pause. He let the taste fade before the next one arrived. Eating this way had become a form of meditation, when he finished, he cleaned everything immediately. No traces left behind. The table returned to its empty, patient state. The midday pause was not for work, it was for listening. Ethan settled into a small chair near the window, knees lightly bent, hands resting on his thighs. He did not look outside right away. First, he closed his eyes. He listened to the bass. The air circulation whispered softly. Somewhere deep within the structure, a system adjusted, then settled again. These sounds were subtle. But they were familiar. They told him that everything was functioning, that nothing needed his attention. His breathing slowed naturally. Inhale, exhale, thoughts came and went, light and unimportant. He did not follow them. He let them pass like shadows across the lunar surface, present, then gone. After a while, he opened his eyes and turned toward the window. The moon lay unchanged, light and shadow rested gently on the dust. The sky remained perfectly black. Nothing moved, and yet nothing felt empty. The stillness was full, complete. Ethan watched without expectation. This pause was not about observation or reflection. It was about allowing time to exist without filling it. On Earth, he had rarely known how to do that. Time there had always asked for something in return. Here, it asked for nothing. Minutes passed. Or maybe more. Ethan did not check. Eventually, he stood and stretched again, slow and careful. The pause had done its work. His mind felt smooth, like water undisturbed by wind. He returned to the corridor, ready for the next gentle task of the day, not because he had to, but because it was time. The afternoon tasks were always small. Ethan liked them that way. Large problems demanded attention, urgency, sharp thinking. Small tasks asked only for presence. They fit the moon better. They fit him better. He opened the maintenance panel near the habitat junction and secured himself with a gentle push of his foot. The tools floated neatly in their holders, arranged in the same order they had been for months. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. He selected the first tool and held it for a moment before using it. The weight felt familiar in his glove. Comforting. Ethan loosened a panel screw slowly, counting his breaths without meaning to. Inhale as it turned, exhale as it released. The panel opened smoothly. Inside, cables rested in careful lines, lights glowing steadily, unchanged. He inspected each connection with calm attention, not searching for problems but acknowledging what was there. Everything looked good. He adjusted a small clamp by a fraction of a turn. It did not need it, not really, but the adjustment felt right. Maintenance was not only about fixing. It was about care. He moved to the next panel. Again, the same motions. The same patience. His hands moved as if they were remembering something older than thought. There was no tension in his shoulders, no rush in his fingers. Time stretched, not endlessly. Comfortably, Ethan listened to the soft clicks of tools meeting metal. Each sound was clear, contained, final. There was no echo here, no unnecessary noise. Every action ended cleanly. He paused once, resting his gloved hand against the wall. The vibration beneath it was steady and reassuring. The bass accepted his touch without response, without resistance. They understood each other. After finishing the final check, Ethan secured the panels and returned the tools to their places. He double-checked the alignment, then checked it again. When everything matched the order in his mind, he nodded once. Done. He drifted back into the corridor and released a slow breath. The base continued its quiet work, unchanged by his presence but subtly supported by it. That was enough. The small tasks were complete, and with them, another gentle portion of the day settled into place. Evening on the moon arrived softly. The base lights shifted again, lowering in brightness, warming in tone. The change was subtle, almost unnoticeable unless one was paying close attention. Ethan noticed. He always did. He welcomed the evening tasks. They were lighter, slower, more reflective. Ethan prepared his final meal of the day. It was simple, familiar, and warm. He ate near the window this time, not because he needed the view, but because it felt right. The moon outside was bathed in long, pale light, shadows stretching gently across the dust. He ate in silence. The spoon moved slowly, the pouch grew lighter, the moment stayed calm. Afterward, he cleaned the space carefully and stood for a while, hands resting on the table, eyes unfocused. The day had moved without friction. That was always his quiet goal. He walked to the window and allowed himself a longer look outside. The lunar surface seemed softer in the evening light. The dust reflected the sun gently, without glare. Nothing moved, but everything felt present. Ethan traced the outline of a distant ridge with his eyes, following it slowly until his gaze naturally came to rest. He breathed, inhale, exhale. The moon did not respond. It did not need to. Ethan turned away and dimmed the lights further. The base responded immediately, slipping into its evening state without question. He appreciated that cooperation. It made the transition into rest feel effortless. He spent a few minutes organizing the next day's schedule. Not planning, just aligning. He adjusted one item by a few minutes, then stopped. Over-planning felt loud, satisfied. He closed the display. The evening did not ask for entertainment. It did not ask for distraction. It asked only for slowing down. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed and removed his shoes, placing them neatly side by side. He stretched his legs gently, then lay back, letting the bed support him fully. The ceiling light now mimicked late dusk on Earth, a soft glow designed to invite rest. Ethan watched it without thinking, his eyes growing heavy. Outside, the lunar dust held the last of the light quietly, without reflection, without drama. Inside, the day was nearly complete. Night on the moon was not darker, it was deeper. The base shifted into its quietest mode, systems lowering their output, lights dimming to a soft, steady glow. Ethan moved through the corridor slowly, as if the air itself had thickened, encouraging gentler motion. He sat at the desk one last time. The night log waited on the screen, empty and patient. Ethan rested his hands on the surface of the desk and took a long breath before typing. He did not rush this entry. The night log was different from the others. It was not only about systems or tasks. It was about closure. About acknowledging the day and allowing it to end. He typed carefully. Day cycle complete. All systems stable. Surface walk successful. He paused. Outside the small window beside the desk, Earth hovered in the distance. Smaller now. Quieter. He glanced at it briefly, then returned his focus to the screen. He added one final line. Crew condition, calm. Ethan reread the entry once, then again. The words felt sufficient. They did not ask to be expanded. He submitted the log, a soft confirmation tone sounded, then faded. The screen dimmed automatically, recognizing that it was no longer needed. Ethan leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes. The base continued its slow breathing around him. Air moved. Power flowed. Everything worked as it should. He stood and stretched gently, feeling the pleasant weight of the day settle into his body. Nothing ached. Nothing demanded attention. That was rare. That was valuable. Ethan prepared for sleep the same way every night. He washed his face. He drank a small amount of water. He changed into clean, soft clothing. Each action was deliberate and unhurried. When he lay down, he adjusted the light to its lowest setting. The room took on a dim, almost twilight quality. Shadows softened. Edges blurred. Ethan placed his hands at his sides and breathed slowly. Inhale, exhale. The moon outside remained still. The base held him gently. The day was finished, and nothing followed it. Ethan lay still. The bed supported him evenly, holding his body in a gentle balance that felt almost weightless. The base lights were now barely more than a suggestion, a soft glow designed not to be noticed. He did not move. Movement was no longer necessary. The day had folded itself away, task by task, breath by breath. Nothing remained unfinished. Nothing waited for him. The base breathed around him. Air flowed through hidden passages. Systems whispered softly, careful not to disturb. The sound was steady and predictable, like a distant tide that never reached the shore. Ethan focused on his breathing. Inhale, slow, deep, exhale. Long, complete. With each breath, his body sank a little further into rest. His shoulders released. His jaw softened. Even the small muscles around his eyes let go. Outside, the moon rested in its endless stillness. No weather passed across its surface. No sound traveled through the dust. The shadows remained exactly where they were, untouched by time. Ethan did not think about tomorrow. Tomorrow would arrive on its own, quietly, just like today had. It did not need his attention now. His thoughts began to slow. They no longer formed full ideas. They softened into impressions. Sensations. Gentle awareness without direction, the faint warmth of the bed. The calm pressure of the air, the distant presence of earth, barely felt, barely remembered. Ethan's breathing grew even slower. Inhale, exhale. The base continued its quiet work, watching over him without question. It did not need thanks. It did not need acknowledgement. It simply remained, and that was enough. Somewhere between one breath and the next, the edges of the room began to fade. The light lost its shape. Sound softened into something barely there. Ethan drifted. There was no falling sensation. No sudden change. Just a gradual release, like loosening a hand that had been holding something for a long time. Sleep came gently. On the moon, beneath a sky that never moved, a man slept peacefully, held by routine, by silence, by the calm certainty that nothing was required of him now, and in that stillness, the night passed, quietly.